All right, Level 1 Coach Podcast, Season 3, off-season, spring, summer, number 2. It's currently April 12th when we're recording this. And we're just going to hop into, we started talking, this is actually our second take at it. We started a few days ago, but we had some technical difficulties. But anyway, we were talking about a tweet, and we're going to jump into that. I'm going to read it, and then I'm going to kick it right over to Mikkel. So, the tweet starts out, finance attracts greedy people, law attracts manipulative people, politics attracts corruptible people, psychiatry attracts damaged people, journalism attracts miserable people. Remember this when you deal with bankers, lawyers, politicians, shrinks, or journalists. Your thoughts?
So, to me, what I found interesting when you sent me this was like a lot of times when you look at maybe some of these different industries and sort of like the people that are in them or the things that occur in those industries. So I'll use politics as an easy example. Like you look at how do politicians end up doing X, Y, or Z that are it's clearly it's clearly not honest or not integrous, and it's indicative of them entertaining some corruption and or being corrupt. And you think like, how does it just keep happening in that industry? Or with journalism, I think that's another easy one where like you turn on the news or you look at almost any headline that you'll see, newspaper or online, whatever, it's usually not positive. It's usually pretty negative, doomsday. And it seems like, well, like everything that's happening in the world is just negative, or everyone who works in a high level political position, sorry, is corrupt. And it's like, no, like the industry itself is attracting people that align with that. So the political industry, if you want to call it, is attracting people that are corruptible, meaning they can be corrupted and also look to corrupt others. Not they get in the industry and then all of a sudden it just spits them out as a corrupt person. Like it is attracting that person to begin with. Same thing with journalism. It's not that the journalists get to friggin' whatever journalism school or the first day on the job and they're like, hey, you got to write about miserable things. It's more so that like they are being attracted to journalism because they know that that's what sells. They know that that's what people want to read about. So it's like an inverse of, I guess, the way I normally think of it is like you get to the industry and then you find out that like you're going to be corrupted, or you get to the industry and you find out you're supposed to write about miserable things when you thought you were going to be able to write about things that are enjoyable. And it's like, no, actually you were attracted to that industry because you're miserable, because you're corrupt. So for me, it kind of flipped it back on its head.
Yeah. I think there's a front door and a back door to both of it. And like the environment piece that you just spoke on is definitely like the back side of it. And I think for me, my initial like thoughts on it, to bring the coaching aspect into this, it was very personal for me because like I started and I thought I had these great intentions to become a coach after dealing with some not so great coaches as a player. And for all the good and well intentions that I had, there was still, I found myself only through reflection and only being out of the game now for 3 or 4 years. But spending those first 2 years in that junior job, I didn't realize at the time, but I now realize, again, through reflection, that I was doing this. And the hot take, because I haven't brought it up yet, I apologize for that. But my, like, a way into this with coaching, my hot take, finance attracts greedy people, for coaching is coaching attracts uncoachable people. And what I thought I was doing was you get into coaching and you help other people. But what I didn't realize with some of the players that I was most at war with, those were the people that were trying to help me the most. And I wanted to deflect and blame them when really I had a ton of inner work to do. So I got into coaching, and you can make the argument that it wasn't a good time for me to do it. Um, Came off a lot of like, quote, trauma that was unresolved from being a player in just really shitty leadership environments. And instead of taking time to process all that I went through in college, a little bit that I went through in junior, and a lot that I went through in youth with like just poor, what I call forced coaches now, I just hopped right into it and kind of became a little bit of the person that I didn't want to be and I didn't set out to be, and started to display some of those like forced tendencies. And let me just kick it over to you right now if you have thoughts on that, and then I kind of want to get into like the idea of displacement behavior, and then we can go from there.
Yeah. Yeah. I think what's interesting about what you're saying is that when you're talking about players that maybe like you felt like you needed to fix, I don't know if you actually use the word fix, but
Yeah.
you felt like you needed to fix them and they were the ones that like most needed your attention. And in reality, like they were teaching you something. And also maybe you didn't need to fix them. Maybe it was just, that's who they are. And you need to maximize them, or you need to make sure that, or you as the coach need to mold a little bit around them instead of the other way. And I think what I find interesting about it is like it's hard to do because I do think as coaches, even as well intentioned as most are, you do get into coaching because you want you want to help, you want to provide a better experience, and ultimately like although maybe we wouldn't use the word fix, you kind of do want to fix things. You want to make sure that if you come in and people talk about like leaving somewhere better than you found it or leaving the woodpile higher. And those are honest and well-intentioned things that I do think a lot of coaches do really well. But it can put you in this like permanent mindset of like, I got to fix him and him and him and him, or her and her and her and her. Um, if you're always in that mindset, you don't have the time to reflect and think like, do I really need to fix this, or do I need to just be okay with this? And maybe, I think if you have a player who's missing meetings or always late, like I'm not saying that's now you're putting the rest of the team in a tough spot. I'm not saying you just got to live with that. But if there are little things, and I don't even know off the top of my head what a good example this would be, but if there are little things that instead of just trying to like swim upstream and always change and always fix, could you just, like I said earlier, like could you mold yourself around how that person is? At the end of the day, depending on what level you're coaching, it's not always true, but a lot of times the coach is older, more mature, older in just simply age. Like even if, like for myself, I'm 30, but the kids I coach are 24 to 19. So like even if you're my age and coaching professionally, you're still probably older than most of the guys you're coaching. So for the most part, like you're usually older. I definitely think coaches would consider themselves more mature than almost anyone they coach. So you're more mature. You probably had a little bit more life experience depending on the individual. But at the end of the day, like it's on you as a coach, I think, to try to mold around what you have. And I think it's something that I've like literally never thought of honestly deeply until right now. Even when we took our first take the other day and it didn't work, like I think when you really examine it, like they're well intentioned that want to fix, and so they become uncoachable because they don't think they need to fix anything themselves. It's they got to fix the things around them, and it's almost like you become a construction worker who just is building, 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 constructing everything, but never taking the time to be like, maybe my hammer isn't working the way it should, or maybe I'm using the wrong nails. And that's a bad off the cuff analogy, but you get the point as far as like where some of the work could be done or where the energy could be placed. And then just the last thing I would say is like, it is. I think it is hard to do when you mentioned like being out of it and having like a year, 2, 3 years to reflect. Like it is really hard to do when you don't have that time built in. And I think when you get into the lower levels of hockey, meaning lower just in terms of like not the NHL, so I'd say Division 3 is probably there. Youth hockey, junior hockey, like there are extended off seasons, even Division 1. But when you're talking about the highest levels, whether it's AHL, NHL, European professional leagues, like a lot of these teams play 80 games, 60 games, playoffs, drafts, rookie camp, friggin' main camp, development camp. Like when are the coaches or managers or whoever supposed to be able to take the time to think about some of these things? Like you're always in fix it mode because there's always something next to fix. So you go from season to playoffs to camp to next camp to preseason, and it's like, man, you had a month to blink and now you're right back into it. So I think sometimes the system set us up for this a little bit, and we can get into that later. But yeah, it's just the other thought that comes to mind for me.
I want to jump off the point right before that one, and we can definitely get into that one. But you were searching for an example and used the construction worker. So what came to my mind, I was in Dallas last summer running a summer camp, for those in the audience that don't know. And I was working with high school kids for context. And like midway through the summer, the guy that has the course out on, power and the importance of that versus force, the guy that preaches that and lives that, I just got a sense like halfway through that there was a disconnect with what I was saying and just the ability for the group to go out and like try it, execute it. And I didn't know if it was purely they couldn't do it from a skill perspective. I didn't know if there was fear behind it. I didn't know if whatever it was. So I wanted to find out like where the limiting factor in that was, so we could just eliminate that and they would attempt. So before one of our film sessions, I sat them all down and I was like, hey guys, I'm going to start really extreme and then I'm going to work narrow. So my first question was, raise your hand if you're legitimately scared of me as a person or as a coach. And one kid raised his hand. And I was like, oh, fuck. Okay. My first thought was, one, good on the kid. Let me praise that. And thank him for having some courage. My second thought was, how many kids didn't raise their hand that are thinking it, if he's actually going to do it? And then third, what am I going to do about it? So there's this moment, and your pride can get involved. And I'm working on a little razor for that. I'll read you guys that for right now. So the pride piece, where this could go, two directions. And I talk about above 200 or below 200, and we can get into some of that this season. But pride closes your ears to the user experience feedback. It also closes your eyes to the nonverbal user experience feedback. So my pride could have got involved, and I could have said, it's one kid, and screw him. And that's what I could have said in the coach's room, shooting the shit with the other coaches at camp as soon as that meeting was over. Just that kid, whatever. Or I can lean into how many kids didn't say anything. And even if it is one kid, I think the word used was like, or the phrase you used, how can I mold myself around this? You're ultimately the problem if players have a problem. Whether it's perceptual or not, whether it's objective or subjective, to them, their subjective reality is the one that you have to deal with as a coach. So my pride can get involved. That's one course of action. And I can go, screw them. Or I can sit them down and have a conversation, or I can make it less formal than that and try and go to lunch with him or whatever. And I ended up talking to him, and I was like, okay, let's like nail into this. Like, what is it? Is it, where do you feel the fear? Is it when I'm speaking? Is it when I'm not speaking? Is it my being? Is it something I'm doing? And what ends up, like, the weird place that we're in coaching right now, and I'd be interested if you've had similar experience with this, but like when you coach the way that I know that you coach, and you coach the way that I know I coach, which is more power based, less what we're used to, how we were used to being coached. Um, there was an inversion with him, and again, dealing with his reality has to be my reality with that kid. So he was like, you just like don't talk that much, and that kind of makes me like feel some things. Like, I don't know how you feel about me. And then the other thing is, most of my coaches like yelled and screamed and always were saying something. And he's like, I think the fact that I'm not hearing as much, even though a lot of what they said wasn't beneficial or constructive, like the fact that I'm not hearing a lot from you, like makes me fearful or nervous or whatever the word that he used. So I'm going to kick that to you for some thoughts. I'm sure you've got some, and then we can keep going.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I don't think you've shared that story with me before, and um, to think that like not saying as much is something that makes him afraid almost, because he's like, I don't know where I stand. At least if he's used to being yelled at or used to being ripped into, at least he knows where he stands. And so I can see from his perspective where that's confusing or scary. I think there's two things that come to mind for me. One is like, I do think and I'm certainly guilty of this. The initial reaction at times is to be like, oh, it's one kid. All right, cool. Well, there's 24 other ones that are fine with me, and not go a little deeper and think like, okay, when I was that age, if I were asked that question, would I have raised my hand? I personally was the type of kid that in high school, even if I was 100% confident I had the right answer in class, I wasn't raising my hand because I hated that like spotlight on you for a minute. I didn't want to. I just didn't want it. Some kids relish in that. They love that. And there's nothing wrong with that. So, like, how many kids were like myself in high school that when you asked that question, were like, there's no chance I'm raising my hand, even though I hate Drew, or even though I'm terrified of him. So, like, it is important to go a step deeper and be like, all right, like, one kid and how many didn't raise their hand, and what if that works its way up to 5? And I think you ask anyone in any industry, like 5 is enough to completely deteriorate a group of, I don't care if you have 100, that's still enough. So you got to fix that. And I think it's cool, like for what you're saying, or I think it is cool with what you're saying, for you to dive deeper and be like, all right, let's talk about this. What is it that makes you afraid? Afraid, scared. So that's like, and it just an interesting, like, it sounds like I'm pumping your tires. It's a good on you to like, to go deeper on that. And then the second thing that I thought of, actually, it's a recent conversation I had with one of our players, just about like how I could better operate, essentially. Like, what could I do better, I think was exactly how I phrased it. And the feedback I got from a kid on our team that I trust, and not that I don't trust others, but like someone whose opinion I definitely value. And he shared that in his opinion, at times, he feels that I'm very like question or conversation based in my approach to maybe something mid game or mid practice. And at times, he said, while like I appreciate it, and I think we appreciate it, and it's part of the reason we respect you, like, you're going to hear us out, and there's a conversation to be had about it. He was explaining that at times that also leads to like, well, is this really, like, if I'm coming to the player and I'm saying, well, what were you thinking there, blah blah blah, like, there's a time where there doesn't need to be a conversation, and it needs to just be like, this is what should have occurred, and we need you to be better next time. And he was like, that conversation sometimes doesn't lend itself to guys respecting what you're saying in that moment as much as they should, because they think they can get out of it a little bit if there's a conversation, or they think they can kind of sidestep the accountability or ownership of whatever that example is, because there's a conversation, and it's not just like, this is what you should have done, period, end. And it was interesting. It was really interesting for me, honestly, because I had the experience most of the time as a player that it wasn't a conversation. It was just, this is what you should have done. And I don't even know if that was always bad, because I think there were times where it was pretty obvious what should have been done. But when I got into coaching, I thought to myself, well, I didn't always love that, because sometimes, like, there was definitely a conversation we had. Like, I get on the bench, coach sees X, but I'm like on the ice about to get my head taken off, and I see Y, and I'm not doing X because Y looked better in that moment. I'm not doing what the coach said or what he wanted me to do after, just because I want to give him the middle finger. It's just like, that's not what I saw in the moment. And so when I got into coaching, I was like, I don't want to come across as if I know it. And look, the reality is too, like, sure, I played D3, I coached D3, but like, I wasn't as good as some of the players on our team. Like, there's guys on our team that had a lot more success in their hockey career than I ever did. So for me to sit here and have all the answers, like, wow, I don't think that's not going to help me, or them, most likely. So anyway, my point is just like, hearing that, as far as like, there's a different way to approach things, and it doesn't always have to be the way that I was doing it. It makes me think of kind of what you're saying, as far as like, this kid's like, I don't know where I stand. And it's almost like, I want to be yelled at, is what he's saying in a weird way. And the kid on our team is kind of saying a little something similar. Like, I appreciate that. It has value to approach things from a conversation standpoint. But at the same time, like, if you need to bring the hammer down, bring the fucking hammer down. And it's just an interesting, like, dichotomy, I guess, because the way I look at things is probably really heavy on the one side of like, I want to do what I feel is right and what I feel I didn't always get. And, if this is a seesaw, like, I'm leaning way too far on the one side. I got to balance it out a bit. So yeah, it's a little different than what you're saying, but it came to mind for me as well.
Yeah, that resonates. I mean, I dealt with it, and it's a lot of where like my reflections started when I was coaching or after I was done coaching the junior team, because I didn't necessarily hear a lot of it, but it was kind of that nonverbal, like, what part of this isn't hitting. And I had some conversations with Todd, the guy I worked with, and like, we would always come to like kind of the same thing, where this idea and like the way that, and you touched on it, like, to bring another example into this, like, to frame it up. You touched on it a little bit when you worked with TJ at Curry, and it's just like, when you're coaching in the way that guys like TJ and you and I and some others, I think we're still early, where a lot of kids that I was coaching in juniors for 20 years prior to getting Drew Carlson as their coach, they were coached a certain way. And whether it's right or wrong, there's this ingrained habit, or there's this idea of what a coach looks like, sounds like, feels like. And I didn't match that at all. And when they've had 20 years of lived experience of, this is what a coach says, this is what a coach does, Drew doesn't match this, the initial response I felt like I got from them was, Drew's the idiot. And Drew has no idea what he's talking about. And Drew's kind of a wacko. And like, these ideas are out of touch to us because we're not familiar with what this could be. He has different ideas, but we've never seen them before. So I think it's just the contrast between, even if force is wrong, since they've had it for so long, like, you're the idiot for like having some different ideas that could be better. But again, perception to them, this is different, this is new. I don't know how I feel about it yet.
I think it's harder too for your like the position you were in as a head coach, because I think as an assistant coach, like you are part of a staff and you're not the sole voice. Obviously, as a head coach, like you have assistants, but I think just it's a different role. Like as an assistant coach, the expectation is different than the head coach, and there's like I think the traditional expectation of a head coach is to be exactly what you're saying, like kind of more like I don't even know if it's forced, but just more like harder, more like direct with your communication and less like not that you can't be player centric, but it's just different. I don't know. I didn't even know. I've never really thought about this. I don't know how exactly to like frame it or put it in words, but like there's just different expectations. The quintessential assistant coach is like easy to talk to, players coach, like friendly, is going to hear you out, isn't going to get upset. The head coach, I think, just by virtue of being head coach, carries like guys are just a little bit more fearful. They're expecting a little bit more of the hammer and less of the talking. And so, for you being a head coach at that time, like I think it is hard because they're looking at like what you said. They're looking at you going, I haven't had 20 years of this experience before. And like, this is so vastly different than what I've had with other head coaches. Whereas if you were an assistant at whatever level, I think they'd look at this and be like, yeah, I like this. I don't have any issue with it. Like, this isn't weird to me. It's an assistant coach. So I think there's like power dynamics at play even within whether you're an assistant or head. And a lot of it is like, it's just perception of the players. But I remember having those perceptions as well when I was playing. Like, head coach is going to bite my head off if I have a conversation about playing time, and assistant coach is going to hear me out. Like, the reality is the assistant coach is going to go talk to the head coach about it anyways, and the head coach is going to have a reaction, good or bad, that's really no different than what the assistant coach thinks most of the time. But you just think assistant coach is more open minded to hearing you out. So anyway, that came to mind for me. But I know you wanted to get into displacement behavior as well.
Yeah, we can talk about that a bit. So like with the idea that, again, like our coaching hot take, probably the name of the episode, coaching attracts uncoachable people. The displacement thing, it comes from, I learned about it through Tiffany. For those that don't know, I don't know if I brought her up on the podcast. She's my fiance right now. So she's a dog trainer, and we have conversations all the time because I think animal behavior and human behavior are linked. Maybe not so obvious, but obvious to me.
I don't think you should even
Might
say
be a
you think
stretch
that.
for some coaches. Probably not the 9 that are listening to this in our audience because they get it a little more than
Humans are animals, so it's
yeah.
guaranteed true.
But like I'll just give you a definition quickly, and then we'll talk about it a little bit, and then I'll kick it over to you. Displacement behavior is something that doesn't fit what's normal. So in a coaching context, we talked about, like, I had work to do on myself. So why would I throw myself into coaching? Not necessarily normal or, quote, the right thing to do, but I did it. So examples of displacement behavior elsewhere. So if a dog scratches their collar when they're learning leash walking, which is like walk by my side, don't react to other dogs, don't have tension on the leash. When they're learning that, scratching their collar might be normal because it's the first time that they're wearing a harness. Maybe it's the first time they're wearing other maybe equipment if they're wearing a gentle leader on their snout instead of a harness. But anyway, they might itch because they're uncomfortable. That's normal. But dogs, and by analogy humans, we learn that we can itch in other contexts to kind of like take advantage of the system or to just get away from something that's uncomfortable. So the dog learns that training stops anytime I itch my collar. I can't do a sit if I'm itching. I can't do any sort of obedience behavior if I'm itching. Everything just stops, and I'm allowed to do whatever I want. So, again, with our analogy, a coach having inner work to do is normal. I think we all need to get better, evolve, whatever term you want to use. It becomes abnormal when instead of taking feedback, reflecting, and iterating, you just project all your negative emotions and blame your players. You become separate from them. They become the problem. And the pride, again, closes your ears and your eyes to what you may or may not be doing. Let me kick that to you for some thoughts on that.
Yeah, like you with your example with the dog, it's like for the dog to have learned now, okay, if I do this one behavior, I get out of the uncomfortable situation. Like it's, I don't even know that. I actually think players do this too, probably in a lot of ways. Like they're able to get out of certain situations they don't want to be in, whether that's practice or games or whatever, by doing one, two, or three things, whatever it might be. Um, but I think for coaches, like as far you're saying like pride closes your ears. Like if you have learned or you think you have learned that like a certain reaction to a player or a certain reaction to a scenario gets the desired result, like it kind of goes back to, honestly, it goes back to your example with the one kid raising his hand. Like if you do that exercise, say you do that every year, and only one kid always raises his hand, then in Drew's mind, it's just this one outlier, and every group is going to have an outlier, and it's fine. Never digging deeper of like what you already said. Are there like 3 or 4 kids that didn't raise their hand? Are there 10 kids that didn't raise their hand? So I think like when you have that pride and that like it couldn't possibly be me that needs to get better, like you're going to close yourself off to possible solutions or potential solutions to some of the problems. And I think like I think what you end up doing is like you end up fixing or trying to fix things that don't need to be fixed. And so there's one central issue or one central problem that might exist within the team. And if you're like you're saying your pride is kind of closing your ears off, you're not able to fix that one central issue that you're not seeing, and so you go about trying to fix all these other like ancillary issues that don't really matter. It's like the quintessential like putting out small fires instead of dealing with what's important kind of thing. That's for me like what comes to mind with what you were saying. That might have been a different path than you had envisioned, though.
No, I think hopping off, we mentioned it in the first take that got nixed, but I think it's important to bring it back up. And you got to it at the end. Do you want to talk about like the analogy of driving 100 miles an hour, like the Fahrenheit 451 thing?
Yeah. So I just finished reading that. We read it in high school, but I don't remember really anything. And the book, for anyone who hasn't read it, is essentially about a futuristic society where books are burned. So firemen are not putting out fires; they're starting fires, and they start fires in the homes of people who have books because books are outlawed. And essentially, everyone lives in these cities in these houses where all you do is hang out in like your parlor, and you can essentially it's a room with 4 walls, and if you're rich enough you can have 4 screens on the 4 walls, and they're interactive, and it's pretty eerie when you think about today's like virtual reality and shit, because it's very similar to that, and you have like families in these walls, and so everyone just hangs out in their house and watches shows and interacts with their family that's in this wall, but it's all fake shit. And one of the parts that we were talking about the other day that I thought was really interesting was like the point of this society is that no one has any time to think. So you get home from whatever job you do and you just immediately turn on the parlor and you just sit there all night. And anyone that goes, if you drive or train, like everyone travels at hundreds of miles an hour, trains, cars. So like in the book, the cars drive upwards of 100 miles an hour, and people get killed all the time in crashes, or they hit pedestrians, and like no one even blinks an eye that somebody was killed, because it's just like, oh, I didn't know I did it. Like, and the point, there's like a little um, rant by one of the characters in the book about like the point of driving 100 miles an hour is that like you can't read the billboards and you can't see what's going on, and you don't notice if the city you're living in has gotten better, worse, deteriorated, built up. It's too hard to tell. um, and the main character, his wife, like she's telling him like he's upset about why do we not read books and what's going on. And the wife is like, well, just go drive around, like just go drive 100 miles an hour, it always makes me feel better. And it's just like it gets to, this idea that like all you need to do is just turn your mind off and not pay attention to anything and drive a million miles an hour.
Yeah, I think that actually links in pretty good with like the displacement idea, where if you think about this, something that really hits home to me today, and for you, you'll be happy to know personally that he wasn't there today for the first time in like 19 days. But um, the inside joke is there's been this guy at the sauna that just started at my gym. So I work out in the morning, then go in the sauna. This guy comes at the same time now. Hasn't been there. Maybe he just moved into town, and he's on the exact same schedule. But instead of sitting in the sauna like I do and just thoughts come to me, and I have my peace and my tranquility and my silence. It's fine if you want to have inputs in the sauna, but this guy doesn't bring headphones. So I just get subjected to his TikTok feed. And it's not on like 7 or whatever an iPhone. It's not halfway up on an iPhone, like it's full tilt. Just reverberating through the entire sauna. And I think for coaches, like, to maybe put a bow on this, like, one, make time, no matter how busy you are. You have to prioritize it, but make time to think. Um, and if there are things going on around you, and even if you think it's that one-off outlier kid that I could have, if my pride got involved, take some time to take ownership and put it back on yourself. How could I potentially be the problem here? That was one of Todd and I's favorite questions to ask, and we had enough there to keep us busy for 2 years doing that. But like, how could I be the problem in this, or be contributing to the fact that this isn't going as well as I'd like it to? But it's a displacement behavior. Like, his phone has overheated a few times, and then displacement, I can't be with my own thoughts, that makes me uncomfortable. I'm going to talk to Drew, and I don't want to talk to this kid. I was so glad his phone died, because I would have got to have my peace and quiet. But then displacement, I'm uncomfortable, I can't sit alone with my own thoughts, I need to now talk to someone. So I think the driving 100 miles an hour, whether you think you're really busy with coaching, which could be perception, it could also be reality. A lot of coaches are understaffed, whatever. But if I had one takeaway, uh, be intentional and make some time to think, and think maybe how I could be contributing to this personally. I'll kick it back to you, and then we'll wrap it.
Yeah, like the example I gave the other day too is like you're out to eat with, everyone's seen this or heard of this, but you're out to eat at a restaurant, and say you're in a group of 4 and 3 people get up to go to the bathroom, and the one that's left picks up their phone, and it's like, is there anything on the phone? Like say this is, you're out with your 3 best friends, like probably the only 3 people that you really talk to over the phone are those 3 people, but you still pick up your phone because like who knows, there might be something there, you got to check. And it's like you don't want to be left alone as that guy sitting in the restaurant alone. It's like this perceptually like bad, negative thing. And so as it pertains to coaching and what you're saying, like there is no doubt in my mind that as you get up to the higher and higher levels, those coaches are, all the cliches, overworked, underpaid, probably overtired. Like there's not enough hours in the day for them to truly accomplish what they're trying to. I just actually, I'll really quickly read this text that was sent to me this morning just from a newsletter about mastery. So mastery is not only about getting better at your craft, but also finding ways to eliminate the obstacles, distractions, and other annoyances that prevent you from working on your craft. Top performers find ways to spend as much time as possible on what matters and as little time as possible on what doesn't. It's not someone else's responsibility to create the conditions for success. You have to actively work to eliminate the things that don't matter from your workload. If you haven't figured out how to do that yet, you haven't mastered your craft. So I I think that's exactly kind of what we're saying is like, look, there aren't enough hours in the day probably to do what you want to do or what you need to do, sorry, for the job you have or the coaching requirements that you have. But if that means eliminating things that aren't important or spending less time on some things that can be nixed and allowing yourself to look inward and like you said, like, am I the problem, or just is the problem that I'm addressing not actually as big and it's something else? Like, am I treating the symptoms and not the cause? There's all these like deeper levels you can get to. And look, maybe it's not always applicable. Maybe sometimes like you are doing the right thing and you're on the right track. And that's not to say that everyone is wrong and whatever. You certainly can be doing this already or could be on the right path and you've got it figured out. But it can't hurt to, this is what I guess is what I'd say. It can't hurt to try, because you can try doing it this way and you can find out, fuck yeah, I'm on the right path. I don't need to do anything different. That's the worst that could happen. And the best that could happen is you find out, oh, that's the problem. And I've been sitting here thinking the problem's X and it's really Z. And it really does come down to like kind of what this guy's saying in his newsletter. Like, no one else is going to figure it out. That's your job. And if you haven't figured it out yet, you're not as good as you think you are. And I think, to tie it all back into coaching and uncoachable, it's like at the heart of it, I think coaches all would identify as coachable people. They would self-identify as coachable people. And they would also self-identify as people that want to help and fix. But like, you got to help yourself before you can help others. And Jesus, I'm not sitting here saying I have this figured out either. Like I just outlined earlier an example of something I thought I was doing that was helpful that clearly could be much better if I handled it a little differently with guys on our team. So there's always room for improvement and ways to get better. But like, I guess is how I'd wrap this whole soliloquy up. If you're not looking inward, you don't even know what's there. You're not even aware of what could be better, what could be worse, because you're just not looking there. So how can you figure out how to go about improving any of these areas we're talking about if you never look inward and you're always looking outward? You got to start, I think, in my opinion, looking inward, figure that out. You master that. All right, now look outward.
Yeah, that all is huge. I'm trying to find one more thing to just leave you with, to leave everyone with. And then I think we can probably jump off this on the next one, because what you said was incredible. Let me try and find this alive. Okay, here it is. This is from me if you want to attribute this to anyone. Humble brag. Everyone thinks they're good. Nobody knows about power laws. Hence why everyone thinks that they are good. Based on what you said, I think we can pick up there next time. If you like this one, share it with a friend. Level 1 Coach Podcast. We're on Spotify. We're on Apple. If you're young like us and you don't like how you were coached, you're probably for us. If you're in your 50s and you didn't like how you were coached and you didn't like the people that you've worked with for the first 20 years of your career coaching and how they operate, you're probably for us. And if you don't think you're for us, try us for an episode or two and you might find out you're for us. So we'll see you on the next one.